Welcome back, everyone, to Real Life Struggles. And we're here with Troy today. Troy, do you want to start with a short introduction?
I know Nick from school. That was actually the last time we talked, so it's good to see you again. But yeah, I've been through a lot of struggles. Personally, I've dealt with some abuse, and then of course there was actually like torture involved with that. I've also dealt with some relationships that had some severely narcissistic abuse in it, and it was actually to the point of gaslighting to the degree that she had me believing that I had PTSD. And so I went in to get checked for PTSD. And of course, one of the things that goes along with it is depression. Now, I do have depression. That's something that I just kind of deal with on my own. But the PTSD, one of the first things they ask about that is, do you think about the military very much? And because of my analytical mind, I had a tendency of diving into any of the traumatic, quote, what people would consider traumatic experiences associated with that. And when you start to do that, you end up thinking about something. And if it doesn't quite work out with that, then you move to the next topic. And if that doesn't seem to line up, you go to the next, and then you go to the next, and then you go to the next. Well, in that thought process, I had gone through so many different situations that were, quote, as people would consider traumatic. I didn't feel traumatic, I didn't feel emotionally affected by it. So I would go back to those situations, and then I would think about what might have been going on. Like at one point, there was a family we were trying to make sure that was safe. At another situation, there was had a lack of food. In another situation, we were left behind. And then I would realize that I wasn't upset about that. So then I would go back and I would start over. And by the time I was done with it, I'd have each experience with so many different things tied to it that it was like this big webbed network of things that were happening. So whenever you go into those meetings and they ask you, okay, do you think about the military a lot? Well, yeah. I was thinking I might have PTSD. Like I think about this a lot. And so that actually led to a diagnosis, but the diagnosis actually ended up leading me to realize that I did have some addictive behavior. And so at least I was able to address that addictive behavior issue. As it currently right now, they're actually trying to figure out how to reverse the PTSD because I ultimately ended up getting a divorce. And once I got the divorce, I seemed to be okay. And then they ended up realizing, yeah, it was just a bad relationship that they pretty much gaslighted you. So currently now I seem to be pretty leveled out, pretty level minded. I've got a good relationship to the degree that things that my wife was dealing with, or I call her my wife, but that she was dealing with in her life and has been dealing with all her life, she's now actually facing and has a healthy outlook on how to deal with that and isn't bogged down with the emotional disturbances associated with it. Been in the military, had a lot of jobs, done some college, scout when I was 16, got emancipated. Well, I actually put the paperwork in, which gives you your rights. But yeah, it's kind of a general overview.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And, thank you for your service also. And
Yeah, sure. No need to thank. You're good though. Thanks.
hopefully we'll have an upcoming video where I talked to somebody that went through a lot of PTSD and talked about how they got out of it. You've mentioned a couple struggles, and maybe pick one and tell the audience what you did to overcome that struggle.
How about you pick something that you haven't been able to talk about much for?
I mean, if you want to talk about the narcissistic, abuse, or if you're comfortable with that, I've actually been through some of that also, and I think maybe some people out in the audience would enjoy hearing about that.
One thing to definitely keep in mind whenever you're dealing with that, or somebody that's treating you, and it could be anybody. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It could be family members. It can easily spread to other people, and so much to the degree that they don't even know that they're like that. They don't even pick up on the fact that they're doing this to somebody and that they're affecting them in this way. They think that they're doing things as usual because that's the kind of life and household that they grew up in. So when it comes to them, even though they know certain things happened to them when they were growing up or as they lived their life, they get this tendency to believe this is how life is, and this is how these situations are supposed to work because it happened to them and it affected them to a degree that it seemed to quote work, and it seemed to be the more powerful, more controlling position to take. You know, a lot of people, they have a lot of fear. With fear comes the need to try and assess a situation and get into a position where you feel that you have a bit of control. And sometimes that just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs to the degree that they end up doing these types of things where they're acting like they're saying something that's meaningful, but it's hurting you as they say it. And when they're doing this, they're saying it in negative ways, they're insulting, they're berating, they're hammering some sort of a subject against you, and they're not allowing you to leave that situation, because while that's happening, they're in this unaffected position, and while they're in this alleviated, unaffected position, it makes them more comfortable. So they don't see an issue with what they're doing because they were more comfortable in their position, and they feel like, yeah, I'm okay, I'm all right. You just must not be receiving the information correctly. And whether that's, you know, insulting you, telling you you're, I don't know, whether you're ugly or whatever it is. In my case, one of the things that I was told was that because I didn't get angry about things, like a lot of things, I didn't get upset to the degree that I'm screaming or I'm yelling or, you know, outwardly showing this anger. That was, of course, in my case, where she would say, you must have PTSD because, you know, I am passionate about our relationship, and I'm passionate about things that I love, and that's why I get so angry with you, is because I'm so passionate. And in some cases that can be true, where somebody does get upset or frustrated, because that's kind of like a drawing away of hearts. When a lot of times when you're in a relationship, you end up having this frustration and anger. A lot of times that will happen because of the fact that you're feeling that gap and that shift in distance of heart. And basically that's typically a communication error. And in her case, she wasn't communicating it correctly. She was being narcissistic and being controlling, being angry, being abusive. And in my case, my response was stepping back, kind of letting her keep going. And I would of course say the stupid things like, are you done yet? You know, like, are we still doing this? So finally she would get angry enough, she would run away, go into the bedroom or something like that. And then I would put on, and I had this habit, I had a stack of DVDs. One of my go-tos, and still one of my favorite movies, is Dancing with Wolves. I put that on, and about like 20-30 minutes into the movie, there's a scene where Kevin Costner meets the first Indian, which is the white lady of the Indian tribe. And right when he meets the tree, that's whenever I push pause. And I would go into the bedroom and I would be like, hey, do you want to talk? Are you able to talk now? I mean, do you want to actually kind of communicate a little bit better? And if I was met at that point with more anger, then I'm like, oh, no, not right now, not right now. And then I would try to go back and zone out watching TV while waiting for a good time to come back and at least try to have this discussion. And one of the difficulties that she was dealing with, which we found out later in life, turns out, you know, she has bipolar issues, and that was never addressed. And she had brought it up while we were in the relationship, but anytime I would discuss anything that might be an actual mental issue or logical issue, she wouldn't have it. You know, she needed to see me do what she was expecting in order for that to be the case. And her problem was, in the beginning, and it survived throughout the relationship, was just a trust issue. You know, she had very little, well, not very little, but she had diminished self-confidence. And her response to any discussions about her self-confidence was that, you know, it's my responsibility to build her self-confidence. And I tell her, you know, it's not my responsibility to build your self-confidence. You know, I mean, if you're doing something that's not good, that's a decision of yours. Just that statement alone would end up weakening her self-confidence. And so her way of pretty much overcoming this self-confidence of the relationship was by being demeaning, by diminishing my position as a person, you know. And that wasn't wasn't working. And even though I would try sometimes to just give in to certain things, it would never be enough. Most of the time it was her stating that I'm cheating. No matter what I'm doing, I'm cheating, and then I had friends that would later jump in after the divorce. They would come up to me and they would say flat out, they were like, she actually had us drive her to your school, and she would go to your classrooms and check in the windows and see what you were doing. And I'm like, okay, that sucks. I didn't know that. But there was never anything to even report because I'm just sitting there in class, like just doing class stuff. If I had any type of a female that I would come across, that would be the thing that I would consider as a friend. Oh, that was a big issue, because in that case, it was definitely, I must be trying to procure sex or have that person be the person that I'm with instead of her. It just didn't matter, in her head, I'm always going to cheat. And I would even do screenshots of my location. Like I would do Google Maps and screenshot it, and try and send that to her, but that would never be enough, because even she even sat there and flat out said, well, you could just have driven by her place and picked her up, and there's things that you can do in a car. Those are just nothing that could be done. If they have that mindset, typically they will not accept the fact that that is what they're doing, whether they're intentionally do it or it's as a result of their upbringing, or they learned it and they just wanted to do it. However it is, it's pretty difficult to get away from. And in my case, it took about 2 years for me to realize that it's actually solidified that it is definitely a problem, and it's gonna have to result in there being some sort of a psychologist intervening or counseling or something like that. And of course, because of my background of where I had been through, I had taken the thought process that, well, I can take it. It's okay. I can take this. That's fine. I'll just keep taking it until she finally gets to a point where she starts to learn this. She starts to better herself. That'll happen at some point. And 13 years later, it still didn't happen. So it resulted in a divorce.
As you were talking, I was thinking, wow, that's actually sounds a lot familiar for a person I was with, and yeah, exactly same thing. If I didn't get mad because some guy looked at her, then I'm not standing up for her. And I was accused of sleeping with coworkers. At one point, she accused me of getting one of my coworkers pregnant, and that's why I wanted to have a vasectomy. Nothing to do with the fact I have 2 kids, and felt like at 44 I was done having kids. And so yeah, I definitely understand everything you're saying, and I think it was a really good explanation of the narcissistic mindset. It really is wanting to be in control and kind of feeling like a small person. So as you were kind of working to overcome some of these struggles, did you feel you had any thoughts or obstacles that stood in the way of that?
I internalized a lot of it, when she would discuss these things, because our relationship started. I met her at Clearwater Beach, and I had a place about 1.5 blocks away from Clearwater Beach, which is a pretty happening place in Florida. It was kind of like the new South Beach 15 years ago. It was, and it still is, pretty busy. And I'm just the type of person that I forced myself to learn how to be social. I don't know if you remember much from me at school, but I was actually picked on for a while at school. I didn't do very well with making friends. When I started trying to figure out how to get around this, I felt crappier about being myself, which was just kind of to myself. I really didn't feel a huge need to have friends. I felt that I needed to have a lot of friends in order to fit in, just to not be looked at weird and actually respected. And so I forced myself to be social. If I end up meeting new people, I'm outward, I'm outgoing, and I will be outgoing typically until people are understanding of who I am and they accept me a little better for who I am. And then by that point, okay. And then I'll calm down and I'll quiet down, and they'll turn around and they'll say, why aren't you hanging out? Are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, that's actually me. You know, if I come to your house and I pass out on your couch, trust me, that's an awesome thing. That means I'm totally comfortable and I'm happy with people being happy around me. So when I get to Clearwater Beach, I ended up having the same mentality that I did when I had my first apartment, which was, you come to my place, it's a peaceful place. You know, I don't need any drama. I don't want any drama. If you bring your drama here, you're not going to be invited anymore. So a lot of times when people were at Clearwater Beach, they would end up perusing through, and then they'd meet this person, they'd end up at my place. And in my place, it was a chillax place, you know. Since my place was so well known kind of in the area by certain people, you know, they would just randomly stop by at my house and knock on the door and be like, hey, you know, what's going on? And I'm like, hey, you know, come on in, have a seat. And because of her self-conscious issues, I'm sitting there, we're watching, like I said, you know, I met her there and she's hanging out, and I didn't meet her with that crowd. She actually found a place, and she had actually told me that she had an abusive boyfriend that she was trying to get away from. And I am a protective individual. I mean, when something goes wrong, I will be the person to step in and say, hey, you know what, this is wrong, this needs to change. So we're sitting down, we're watching a movie, and knock on the door. I open the door, and it's a woman and her friend, and they're both in bikinis, and they're just walking around, and they're like, hey, you know, what are you doing? And I'm like, hey, you know, kind of hanging out and spending time with a new friend. I think she might actually be a girlfriend, you know, but you guys, and I turned to her, and I'm like, do you mind if they come in? And she's just like, got an angry face on her. And I'm like, oh. So I just kind of look at them, and I'm like, it's probably not the good time, you know, but you know, maybe some other time, you know, for sure. They're like, okay, cool, you know, and they just left and shut the door, sat back down, and kind of stayed in this mood. But I didn't really address the situation or anything like that. I just kind of said, you know, hey, you know, it's just who I am, you know that, you know, people stop by. Well, probably about a week later, we end up going to a bar. We go to the bar, we're sitting there playing pool, perfectly good time. And there were 3 women that were there. While they were doing whatever they were doing, next thing you know, they're there at the table, and they're like, hey, do you guys mind if we play? And I'm like, well, and I looked right at them, and I had learned from them last time, you know. I said, hey, you know, I'm actually trying to spend some time with my girl here, you know. It's actually totally up to her. I kind of turned, and I was about ready to just completely walk away from them. But as I'm turning around, I looked at her, and she looks at me, and she's like, no, that's okay, you know, they can play. I was like, okay, no problem, cool. So they're playing, and turns out one of them kind of starts to try and get in between us and starts to try and get my attention. And I would turn and walk away and walk back to her. I would literally anytime anything like that would happen, I would turn around and walk away to her and just kind of spend time, be close to her. And then it was followed by one more time on Valentine's Day. We go out, we're sitting down, we're eating, and then there's a couple, just 2 women that walk in, but there's a way you can present yourself that doesn't look almost demeaning to the person you are. I mean, like, there's a certain amount of makeup that's put on that looks like war paint. They've got straight painted eyebrows, super thick fake breasts, these dresses that are just extremely revealing, and you're sitting at a Carrabba's. I looked up and I was like, and I kind of kept eating. She was like, what happened? I was like, nothing. It's just that there's a couple of women that walked in, and they're just not, I'm not trying to be mean, but they just, no. And so she turns around and looks. I guess she didn't understand what I was trying to say, but she took that personally. She never said anything about it. So those 3 incidences are the incidences that she used as an explanation as to why she never trusts me. So throughout the entire time that I was in the relationship, no matter what I was doing, of course, she always said that she didn't trust me. Now, I had never done anything to actually cross her trust. It had never been anything that I had ever done. It was mainly other people that were just showing up in my space, and I wasn't being mean to them. I wasn't outwardly saying, hey, you guys need to dress differently. I wasn't telling the people that showed up at my door, hey, you guys should know better. I wasn't telling the people that were at the bar, hey, you guys need to get, you know, I wasn't mean about things. I was just relaxing. So anytime that she would bring up these situations associated with, you must be cheating, I internalized it as, I must have not handled those situations correctly, and I need to prove that I'm trustworthy. And so it led to all these things that were me going through extra efforts of no lock or even a lock on my phone with and I would give her the PIN code. You know, like, this is how you get in my phone. I would walk in, I would just set it on the coffee table. You want to go through my phone, go through my phone. You want to go through my text messages, go through my text messages. You want to go through my emails, do whatever. She had access to every single thing that existed that was me, to the degree that a lot of people would say, that's too much. You know, there's no independence there. You're not your own person. And I kind of realized that I wasn't my own person in the end. And it took going through the entire relationship to get to that point where I had seen, this is the case. This is what's going on. It is narcissism, but I was out of the relationship by the time I learned. I had already sacrificed my own individuality or personal identity to the degree that I feel like now, and I talk to people and they ask, you know, like, what have you been doing with your time? My actual plans when I got out of the Marine Corps was to go join the UN or the French Foreign Legion. Those were what I really wanted to do, because I felt that would have been a more noble cause than what I was experiencing with the Marine Corps, which kind of died at the end of Iraq. You know, when we went into the campaign, I still have my own reasons as to why I was there, and I still feel legitimate about that. But I still saw just cause in what was going on for my involvement. I thought the Marine Corps was the noble group to be in, and it didn't feel noble anymore. So I wanted to go to the UN. I wanted to, or go to the French Foreign Legion, one of the two, because I felt that those were legitimate peacekeepers. Then I got into this relationship, and I kept thinking, okay, well, you know what? I'll give it a little bit of time. She'll learn who I am, and then I'll go. But the trust was never there. The relationship didn't become what I really needed it to be in order to do what I really wanted to do with myself, and I lost that to the degree that I ended up, okay, well, let's go to college. Let's find some legitimate thing to go to college for. So I ended up getting into environmental science. Sure, that's fun, but then I started doing my own thing because I wanted to learn more mechanical engineering. And so my entire dynamic associated with why I was going to school was wrong. And she's the one that pushed environmental science. Now, I did do some of that in the Marine Corps, and that was why she said I should do that. But, you know, it wasn't where my heart was. I did learn a lot and I appreciated it, but it wasn't where my heart was. It wasn't what I wanted to really go to school for. And so when I realized that wasn't working for me, I told her, okay, you know, like, I don't know, you know, I think I might need to do something else. And so her response was, well, then maybe you need to go in for business. You should be, you know, in business administration, you know, you should pick that up, you know, da 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 da. So I was like, well, I don't know, you know, I kind of want to do something else. And she didn't like that. So of course, more sacrifice. I go along with what she was wanting because I would feel that would help alleviate the tension associated with whatever is happening in that relationship. And ultimately, in the end, I sacrificed so much of my time that people ask me what I did with my time then. And it's like, well, crap, you know, like, I kind of wasted it. You know, and it took a lot for me to realize that I'm going to have to leave. I have to go. And none of the things that I had earned. I mean, when I showed up in Clearwater Beach, I had a couple duffel bags. I had gotten rid of a bunch of stuff. It was kind of like dead weight to me to have storage units with all this stuff, because to be honest with you, buying a couch is something that I want to experience with somebody I love. I didn't want to just have the same couch that I had as a bachelor, you know, so I just dumped it. And I had like 2 duffel bags. By the time we had our divorce, we had just moved into a new house down in South Tampa. 3 26-foot truckloads, the U-Hauls, full of stuff to this house, all of this stuff going on. And I was like, I'm going to have to leave everything. I'm going to have to find myself. I don't even know what I am doing anymore. I really have to figure out what to do. And I had to literally give up on the rest of it. And that was one thing to overcome, was the fact that this is somebody you love. This is somebody that you married. And I am married initially because she had pressured me into it, because I mean, obviously if I love her, that's what you're supposed to do, get married. So without question, I was like, okay, let's get married. Let's do it right now, you know? And so we did. But my entire thought process was I didn't want to fail at what I loved, which at the time was her. And no matter how much I wanted to, I had to completely change how I was looking out. And I had to actually look out for myself, which is something that I really wasn't used to doing, was just looking out for myself, sacrificing somebody else for myself. And that's how it felt at the time. I felt like I was failing her, and she would tell me, she would flat out tell me that I'm failing her. And so I would intrinsically feel conflicted about leaving that relationship because I'm leaving a loved one behind. I would never want somebody to do that to me. Like, how could I possibly be okay with getting a divorce and then tell myself I'm a good guy? You know, I'm gonna have to look like a piece of crap to people for having had this divorce. You know, I mean, you don't leave somebody you love. You don't do that. But in this case, it was just, I had no choice. And it was to the degree where ultimately I had a backpack with all of my important data, and I had paperwork, I had changes of clothes, I had hygiene gear. I mean, like, I had a go bag ready, and I had it sitting back behind the couch, even though we had a discussion about this divorce ahead of time. She had agreed to the divorce. She had agreed to how things were going to be separated. I had things that were boxed up, and she helped me box them up. But when it came to the day, I was like, okay, you know, we got to go ahead and do this. So I walked into we had a spare room. It was, the entire bedroom was turned into a closet. And so I go into the closet room, and I'm starting to grab a box, and boom, here she comes running and jumping on the box. You're not taking that. You're not doing this. I had duffel bags. She's standing on there. No, you're not taking any of this. You're going to stay here and you're going to talk to me. I'm like, we talked about this. This is our third time going through this. Like, I've got to go. You do understand I've got to go, right? And no matter what, you know, it's just, it was my own background was destroyed by her calling the police, telling them that I was abusive to her. And what would happen is she would end up flipping out, getting mad. I mean, at one time, the first time it happened, she was actually about ready to splash me with boiling water. But I looked at that pan and I was like, why am I feeling like I need to? And oh, I got to dodge. And I dodged it. And that was like the chain reaction. It just kept on going from there, getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Where she would be putting her hands on me, and I'm sitting there, and just like I said, you know, I can take it, but try to push her away, and she would flip that around on me. So I ultimately had to have a go bag ready, and so I'm like, no. So I grabbed the bag, and I walked outside, and she did not see that coming. But I was so conflicted by it. Basically, the most difficult thing was that sensation that you're leaving somebody behind that you love, and that you wouldn't want somebody to do that to you. And it ends up being an inherent confliction, like I kind of stated, to do something like that. And you can't internalize that. You can't feel like a lesser person for that when you know that there needs to be a change, there needs to be a new direction, and there needs to be stronger boundaries set forward in keeping that. And the boundaries thing and that whole moving away from, and that's one of the biggest, hardest things to do. Because you always intrinsically, narcissists have a tendency of searching out somebody that has more empathy for people, and they kind of prey on that. I don't know if prey is even a word somebody had used. Givers and extreme givers and extreme takers is a term that I've heard come up. And being an extreme giver, you want to do the best that you can for that extreme taker that you love, and that never changes. And if it does, you're extremely lucky. But that whole intrinsic boundary of leaving somebody behind that you love is definitely a huge hurdle to get over. And even sometimes now I question, you know, what if I had stuck out just a little bit longer? Would she have realized? Would she have gotten better? Would she have gotten the help she needed? But I have no idea if she did.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, because I lived on my own for a year before filing for divorce. And so I completely understand that feeling of, well, if I wait just another month, maybe she'll miss me enough and realize, you know, things, and we can work this out. And if they don't get the mental health they need first, and living in China, mental health here is You talk to a doctor for 5 minutes and he goes, "Oh, you must have this. Here, take this medicine and come back in a month." And they don't
As
have
a
that.
psychiatrist.
Yeah, they don't have that intense, counseling and stuff. Once you recognized the problem and knew that you had to make a change, did you have any resources that helped you to make it through things and to get out of the situation?
No, not really. I mean, I had lost so many friends. Some of them come back around now. I had a best friend that was supposed to be his best man at his wedding, and she caused problems with his bride to be at the time, and she was actually supposed to be in the wedding party with her, but she found some sort of issue, had to do with high heels, and it turned and erupted into a big thing. And so people would come from, like, different places to come visit, and most of the people that I knew at the time were not from Florida. I mean, I wasn't from Florida to begin with. I was kind of down here on a vacation, and never left. I really didn't have too many resources, but I did have one thing that was going for me, and that was the military background. But there's a group that's down here that's called St. Vincent. They're actually low income people, and it turns out that they also had a military connection. And so I actually lived in a rehab facility. Like, I had left with my backpack, not having a plan. So I had kind of did calling around, digging around on the phone, was Googling, and finally came across this St. Vincent de Paul thing. And then I called them up. They said they have a bed available, and that I'm a candidate for free housing. And I'm like, well, I mean, I make income. I do work, I do have that coming in. And they charged me like $130 a week. But I mean, the beds, they had bed bugs, they had all this stuff. That was about the only resource that I had. That was it. Most of my friends weren't around because, I mean, even when they were coming to visit, they learned to call mid-trip. I was living in Tampa at the time, and like Joe, my buddy, I was actually texting him not too long ago today. But him and his wife would be on the way, and they would give a call and like, hey, is everything still good? We still cool? Like, we still coming to campfire? And I'm like, yeah, man. Like, or no, maybe not now, But even times that I said, yeah, they would show up, and she wouldn't come out of the room. She'd be angry or upset, or we need to have something to have. We need to talk about something. I'm like, okay, can we talk? And she's like, well, not with them here. I'm like, well, I mean, what do you want me to do? And they would just be stuck in the living room watching TV by themselves. And so they got tired of it. And then, of course, the wedding thing happened, and they were just done. Yeah, not really. All my resources kind of died out with them, except for work. And that was it. And the work that I had really wasn't what I wanted. It really wasn't pulling the money that I needed. Turns out that the job that I had beforehand, before so we tried to get a divorce beforehand, and that didn't go through. And this was about a year later. But the job that I had a year before that was actually, it was a cell phone tower building and refurbishing company. The vice president was her uncle. So we know what happened to that job right as soon as the board discussion came along, or the divorce came along. Once that popped up, we're going a different direction. Oh, is that so? So that high-paying job was gone. It really wasn't that high-paying, but it was reasonable enough. And so yeah, resources were low. It was, but it was okay, because I realized after I left, I felt, for lack of better terms, free. And it was an unexpected feeling. I walked away, and I'm not gonna lie, as soon as I was walking away, as soon as I had grabbed that backpack and I started walking out the door, just this rush of emotions going through me. I was like, dude, you're turning your back. You love her. You're this, and you can work it out. And these emotions just started taking over for a minute. But and she took my keys. She had my keys. She had kind of diminished the accounts, all kinds of stuff. Actually, she did completely diminish the account. I kind of thought about it, and I was kind of I kind of started feeling that old me before I met her, within about a mile of walking to the bus stop. Not even a mile. It's probably about a quarter mile. And I was like, well, this is gonna be different. I'm on my own. Like, I remember me. Like, wait a second. Like, I think I'll be all right. And then I just started hitting the for lack of better terms, pavement of Google, looking for whatever I could. And when I found it, believe it or not, when I got in contact with St. Vincent de Paul, they told me to come meet them at the office. So I went to the office. While I was sitting in the office, now I don't know if she had some sort of app that was on my phone, tapping it or something. I have no idea. I was told that she recruited her cousin to hunt me out, to find out where I could have gone. But while I was in the office, somebody had come into the office as I was talking to the head of the facility that dictated who would be accepted or put in for acceptance and who would get what rooms, all that stuff. And another third comes in, and so this person comes in and it says, hey, you know, there's somebody out front looking for you. And I was like, what? Does it happen to be a black BMW? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And sure enough, it was her. She had tracked me down to this place and was already outside on the road, just parked there. And I told him, I was like, I'm not getting out of this office until I know what's going on, because I need to know whether or not I have an option to stay here. And I can tell her that she needs to leave, but if she doesn't leave, we're gonna need you to contact the police. And he was like, all right. And everything worked out with staying there. So I ended up walking outside, and I was like, look, I'm set up here. You don't need to mess it up. They've been informed on what's going on, and they will contact the police. And so she left. But she kept coming back around, contacting me on the phone, saying, hey, I got more of your stuff. And she would use my items as bait. You know, she would say, I've got your stuff. You know, you want it? And of course I did. So I would go out, meet her on the road or wherever, and first thing out of my mouth would have to be, let me get the items first. Let's get the items first, because she would try to stir it into a conversation. But nah, resources, nope.
I would say I can't believe your story, but I can believe the story that I know the narcissistic behavior, you know, that's pretty much exactly what they do. You know, they can't give up. And if you win, then they have to win on top of your win and keep going. And I've had situations like that. You know, I left too, and oh, I have some things. And then, oh, you know, we're going to my parents for Spring Festival. You know, you should go. And it's like, no, we've lived apart for a year. I don't want to sit around your parents having them ask me why I don't want to be married to you anymore. And she basically pretty much tried to force me onto the train. You know, I helped get everything to the train station, and I'm like, all right, you're an adult. You can take 2 kids down the steps. Oh, you have to go. Okay. So and the whole time she's insulting me.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so I get the 2 kids and I drag all the suitcases and stuff down to the train. Oh,
the end is typically the worst.
Yeah.
You see more of that animal come out.
Yeah. And then, you know, so I get the stuff in, and it's like, okay, you can haul these, you know, 3 feet to the train where you get on. Oh, no, you have to. And then it was like, no, you have to get stuff on the train. I'm like, yeah, I know, because then I have to get it then I have to put it away. Then I have to help move into their seats. Then the door's closed. Now I'm stuck on a train. And yeah, I can get off at the next stop and buy a ticket back, but that's just annoying.
And the whole time that you're there, you're trapped. And she's
Exactly.
going to try and talk about stuff. She's going to try and spin things.
Exactly. Would you say you feel the struggle is over? I guess, I mean, obviously you're divorced from her, but with the dealing with narcissistic behavior and the effects that it happened, do you think that's over, or are there still some long-lasting effects that are still here to this day?
There's some long-lasting effects, because in my situation, the first time she had contacted the police and told them that I was being abusive to her, The police had looked at me and they're like, dude, like, we know you were in the Marine Corps. If you really wanted to do something, you could have done that to her. And she doesn't have a mark on her. Like, what? This isn't making sense. You're all tore up, you're scratched up, you're bruised up. And she's got nothing. And I was like, I know. Here in Florida, they have a law. Their law is that if there's a domestic, if both parties are at the same location, no matter what, one of them has to go to jail. It's a law. So there was no choice. Somebody was going to go to jail. Now, I knew her enough to know that she's not going to survive in any jail. I mean, that just wasn't going to happen. I mean, she's going to be destroyed. And maybe hindsight, I sit there and think maybe she should have. Maybe she should have gone to freaking jail and she should have experienced what the crap she was doing on herself. But at the time, I was working for myself. She was working for a company and she couldn't miss the hours. She really liked the job, all this stuff. I honestly believed that it would be more damaging if she went to jail. So I was like, all right, whatever, let's go, you know? So in my thought process, I didn't think about it at the time. I just thought I couldn't do that to her. So I was in the military. I told you I was tortured when I was a child. You know, there was all kinds of things that happened to me in life. So really a day in jail isn't really going to be anything for me but a new experience. Turns out I got good sleep. That was the first time. The reason why it was just the first time was because of the fact that, for one, I mean, she just recanted everything at that first time, and all the other times she just would sit there and she would go back to go to the courthouse and do all the paperwork and just say, no, there's no issues right now. We need to, it's okay. You know, we can live together and blah, 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 blah. And then of course, when she saw me though, which would be the next day, she would profusely apologize. You know, I'm sorry, you know, I didn't realize what was going on. You know, it just, things got out of hand, you know, whatever reason it was that she was giving me. But I thought about what that looks like on somebody's record. Just having on somebody's record that you've gone to jail. And the reason why you went to jail was because somebody claimed battery or domestic violence or whatever it is. That looks bad. It just looks bad. I mean, if I was to look up somebody's record at that time, if I was to have looked up somebody's record and it never happened to me, and I would have seen that, I would be like, oh, you know, like, who is this person? Who is this person really? Like, this isn't right. There's something wrong with this person. And I don't like people that are like that. I don't hang out with them. I don't associate with them. I find out that they're that type of person. I'm done. I realized, okay, I just destroyed my legal, I guess, background by having this on me. And so that just made it easy to accept all the other times. It's already messed up. I'm married to this person anyways. I'm going to have kids with this person. This is the person that's going to be in my life. I don't need to impress anybody else. You know, it's not a concern of mine because, you know, I don't need to be concerned about what some woman's going to think down the road because I've already got that woman now. You know, this too shall pass, but it never did. And so when I got out of that relationship, there were people that would pick up on who I was. They realized it. They were like, well, I mean, I get it. A lot of times I'd meet women that had been through relationships that were similar and they got it. They understood. In some cases, it was just a non-issue. You know, they were smart enough to realize, you know, because I told them flat out. I mean, like, I didn't want to waste time. You know, I didn't want to be dating somebody and then, you know, a month or 2 months down the road or even a year, whatever down the road, my brother just found this out about you. What is going on? I was like, no, like, I'm just going to tell him flat out, like, this is some of the stuff I've had to deal with. And this is something that you're going to want to know. And so I would tell them. And in some cases, they would get their feel for it. And they were okay. They were like, okay, well, I'm perfectly comfortable with who you are. I don't see any issues. It seems to be fine. You know, you're forthcoming. When we have issues, we talk about it. We discuss it. We work it out. Then there were some that, you know, when they were doing that, they'd hear from, you know, a family member or somebody like that. One of them, she had kids, and we had actually dated for a while, even after I told her, and she had told her daughter. and her daughter was 15 at the time, and she said that, and she hadn't met me before. The daughter didn't. So the first thing in daughter's mind was, oh my God, you're hanging out with what kind of a person? Like, they have what on their record? Like, that's not good. That's not good at all. You know, you should stop. You should stop. You should stop. You should stop. I'm not comfortable with it. And so anytime we would go out on a date, you know, the daughter was just asking, are you okay? Is everything all right? How are things going? But it was coming from a different approach, not just, you know, hey, are you having a good time? It was more of a concern. And ultimately, that one ended up saying, hey, you know, based on your record, I can't do this. You know, I mean, my daughter's uncomfortable, and so we're gonna have to stop. And I said, okay, you know, no problem. I get it. But she stayed in contact, and so I actually ended up, you know, moving on. And then she would still call, like, say, hey, you know, or needed a hand with something. And so I'd show up, I'd give her a hand, you know, and she wanted to paint a couple rooms in her house one time. I gave her a hand doing that. And then after a while, they kind of realized who I was, but it was, you know, kind of too late. And so we remained friends after that. But, you know, having to overcome the stigma associated with that type of effect. And the thing is that she flat out told me, you know, she told me when she was doing it, this is going to affect you, and nobody's going to want you but me. They're going to see this, and they're just not going to trust you. So it's not going to matter who you are. And that was tough. That was tough, because at the times that I was dating women, at the time, I had to overcome that. You know, I had to accept it for what it was and just live that life, you know, knowing that that's just something that I have absolutely no control over, that can completely hinder life altogether. And, you know, luckily there's people out there that can read people enough, that can make their decisions based off of, you know, who somebody is versus what they hear or what they read. You know, there are good people that can see things the way that they really are. You know, may have been a blessing in disguise. You know, maybe it helped me get through the people that were not going to be so malleable to other people and actually look at you for you. And so here we are, and I mean, we've got a great relationship from what I feel. You know, communication was never her strong suit, so we worked through that. Yeah, we're working on it. We're getting that, and she's doing incredibly better. It might have been a blessing in disguise, but it was definitely a hurdle having to deal with that history. And of course, I mean, that's I got a good one. I got a real good narcissist. I mean, she dragged my name through the mud any way that she possibly could. And I was driving one time after we were already separated. We weren't even in contact at the time for months. And I get a contact from a relative. Hey, have you been on Facebook? And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? My phone was blowing up, and my text messages were going, and my instant messenger was going, and I was driving. And so I was like, okay, I gotta figure out what's going on. And so I pulled over and I grabbed the phone, and it was my cousin calling me. And she's like, do you know what Leanne just put on Facebook? And I'm like, what? You need to look. And I'm like, okay. And I go, and she's like, and she tells me, she's like, do you want us to do something about her? Because my blood family, even though I'm very, very detached from them, and they were out for blood. But yeah, that was difficult, you know, having to figure out whether or not he was even going to be able to come back from that, you know. But I allowed it, my own fault per se, you know, my own reasoning of, this is the person I'm going to be with the rest of my life. You know, this is my love anyway. So what does it hurt, really? What does it matter? You know, but it does. You know, these things do catch up with you. They do make things hard, and you really just have to kind of find a way to accept the reality as what it really is, and be happy with yourself. You know, find yourself. That's sometimes hard. You know, after doing that, after having so many years of somebody treat you like you're a bad person, and speak to you in manners that literally sound like you must be a bad person.
Yeah, and I know you because we've went to school together, and you've shared a lot of your story. But going back to the thing with people looking at your record and assuming that you're an abuser, and you had mentioned that she would go and recant her story, and that on the flip side, that's often what happens in abuse is the abuser makes threats and stuff, and you better say that what you said is false. And I can see as an outside person, or even the courts, they've already seen this pattern of behavior in other people, and then they see her going, oh well, no, nothing actually happened. And I can see that, and it is a pretty tough struggle to get through that. And you make decisions at the time, and then you look back and go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe that wasn't so smart.
To add to it, and this part was just nuts, but I didn't learn my lesson. I didn't learn my lesson right away with her. I thought that because I had already been through it, I can handle somebody else that might be like this. And so I actually came across somebody that was very, very detached and very fake, per se. Put on that fake persona. She was Russian, and she came from a Russian background, and very traditional Russian. And one of the things that happened is that when we were breaking up, she got really mad, and she turns to me and she tells me flat out, I'll call the police and I'll tell them that you hit me. Now, like I told you, I was open about what had happened to me in my past, about who I am and what I had dealt with in previous relationships. And we were seeing each other for about a year at this point. But she got super mad and she said that. And the minute she said that, boom, out came the phone, and I pushed record, and I'm like, I'm recording this. Like, this is not something that is going to be happening. And ultimately, I was talking to her on Facebook Messenger, and I had to save the messages. I actually took a recording of me scrolling through Facebook Messenger to show that it was her saying this. But I had to ask. I was like, why did you say it? I knew why she said it. She was mad. She was angry. She wanted to hit a nerve. And sure enough, when I said it, I was like, why did you say that? Like, when have I ever been like that to you? Like, what have I ever done that was even remotely like that? And she's like, well, you haven't. And I was like, why did you say that? She's like, well, I was just angry. I was just mad. Later, she tried to manipulate me and get me kicked out of where we were staying. I was at work, and I had this gut feeling that something was off. So I told my boss, I was like, I think I gotta leave early. By the time I got to my car, I ended up getting a call, and it was somebody sitting there talking about how she had put in an injunction against me. Now, I don't know what was going on that coincidentally got this judge to be the judge that was looking at my case. Because in my head, I'm sitting there thinking, anybody looking at my record, now there's another person that's saying this. And I mean, I didn't get a chance to read what was being even said. I had no idea. It wasn't until later that I found out that it was her mom saying that, she has dealt with people that are aggressive before, and that Troy must be aggressive. And then she got one of her friends to say that, well, I saw somebody that was like him, and I think it was him. And he was calling when she didn't want him to, and that was about the extent of it. But the fact is that there was another person that was putting in a request for an injunction against me. And so in my head, I thought, well, that's a wrap. I was like, it doesn't even matter. There's nothing I can do. I mean, come on. I was like, who is gonna even give a crap about what I have to say? But sure enough, at the end of the day, because they wouldn't tell me the details about it, and they had no idea what was going on, and then it turns out the judge flat out sat there and said, things aren't lining up. Things aren't lining up here. And I want to actually hear the full story. And we're going to have but basically you go to court to hear the sides of what was going on. And the judge was actually smart enough to realize, yeah, this is a continued pattern. And I had a lawyer that was involved at the time. I had already found one that was for my ex. I had called her up and I'm like, look, I'm sorry. I thought I wasn't exactly careful with my women. I thought, like I had already been through one that was like this. Because I mean, like you see the movies where you're like, oh, it's the manipulative woman, like maybe that's good for me, but it wasn't. And I had to learn my lesson that way. But yeah, after that, I finally did learn my lesson. You can't just take the fact that you've been through something difficult and put yourself into another difficult position just because of the fact that you survived it. People are different. Things are different. And luckily, of course, in that scenario, she'd actually calm down and we had talked and she ended up telling him, she was like, hey, it's just, I was upset, I was angry, and I kind of wanted to get back at him, and communication was kind of failing at the time. So I thought this would be, something to do. But the judge actually understood, and it was actually a good wake up call for her and a wake up call for me to stop messing with these types of people, and for her to kind of start paying attention to her patterns, and things were left at a better pace in that situation. But I didn't stick around and say, let's do round 2. I learned that lesson.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, mistakes are one thing, but if you don't learn from them, then
yeah,
what was the point of having the mistake? All right, well, Troy, thank you for sharing so much. And I think people listening to this, they'll hopefully, maybe some people will resonate with what you said and also go on the path of escaping narcissistic abuse and in different relationships. Is there any other additional advice you'd like to give to the audience?
Boundaries is definitely a big thing. With my wife here, she's had some family members that I picked up on right away. I mean, you can warn somebody, that there's something going on that's amiss, something not quite right. But a lot of times people have a tendency of getting into the mannerism of them actually having to experience the damage or the trauma associated with it for them to actually believe it. And that's the part that's difficult. So if you're in a relationship or of any type, whether it be a friend or a family member or relationship, whoever it is, if you start feeling that you're getting, berated too much or insulted too much or gaslighted too much to believing that you're something that you're not, into something that's just not right, establish those boundaries. Establish those boundaries of, look, this is not how you communicate. This is not how things are rectified. This is not how things should be. Definitely hone in on that boundary, because there's a thing that exists, and I've been using this term, and I say it because my name is Troy, but Trojan horses. They've always got a way to Trojan horse their way through those boundaries that you create. In our cases, it's been things like, well, we love you, right? But it's almost like every single time I would hear somebody sit there and say to me, well, we love you, right? Why are you saying it like that? If somebody knows you love them, then they know you love them. If you know that they love you, you know that they love you. There's always some sort of Trojan horse, gifts, like, oh, I gave you this, I got you this. Why aren't you happy about that? Well, because we never discussed what we needed to discuss to begin with. That's been forgotten. People will avoid discussing things. They'll try and find some sort of other path to keep things focused on, so that the actual issue doesn't get handled, doesn't get the attention that it needs and the help that it needs. And sometimes we don't have those abilities with us, and there's nothing wrong with having a third party become involved, whether it's somebody that's unbiased and a trusted friend that knows these types of things, or an actual psychologist, not a psychiatrist, somebody that can help with those boundaries and be like, okay, well, wait, I'm not going to respond to insulting. I'm I'm not going to insult. I'm not going to respond to insults or berating. I'm not going to play the Facebook game, where, oh, well, it's kind of related to, but look at my posting and look at what I said, and that requires some sort of response. Not everything requires a response. You don't have to respond to everything. You don't have to have an involvement to every single thing that they end up doing, because a lot of times what they're doing is making it seem like your position needs to respond to their position, and that's not always the case. You have a right to redraw attention to, hey, look, I brought this up. This is something that's important. It's important to me. And in order for our relationship to be a good relationship, not just the relationship that looks like it's good, but an actually true relationship on the level that it should be, that's of good quality, of good morals, then those things need to be respected. And if you have somebody that's just steamrolling over you and not paying attention to those things, that just keeps on going and going and going and never does anything to focus on the true issue that's bothering you, then no matter what they're doing, they're not really loving the situation, or they're not really loving you the way they should, or at least the way you feel they deserve. There's people that'll call you family left and right. You're family, or you're my loved one, or you're my friend. You should respect that. I'm your friend. Look at what I did. I'm your family member. I invited you to dinner. I cooked you supper. I say I love you. Fine. Okay. Even if you do love that person, even if that person does leave you, I mean, there's nothing even saying that narcissists don't actually love that person. They might possibly love that person, but they're treating that person wrong. They're not treating the love the way they should, and keeping a hold of those boundaries and not forgetting about it, because they'll try and make you forget, because that happened so long ago, that it didn't get addressed for a year, 2 years, 3 months, however long it is. There's nothing wrong with bringing the attention back to that deep-seated emotional concern that you have, because no matter what, that emotional struggle that you're feeling with that person, whoever it is, and how they're treating you is legitimate. That is right. It is something that's strong. It is something that is worth the time and effort to handle and address, because those are the type of people you want in your life. And you can't always just accept their behavior for what it is. Oh, they've always been like that, or whatever it is, or and those Trojan horses, they exist. They will do something to kind of sneak their way to where you're not focused on what was originally focused. They'll get others to recruit and become their friends, or even though they'll tell their own friends, what this person did, they look at, blah 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 blah, and badmouth you behind your back, while looking to your face and talking about how, well, they have the best, outlook for you. You just need to trust them. Well, if you're feeling a distrust, if you're feeling an emotion that's not right, it's absolutely important that you address that, and you can't just let it go. You can't just give in and just accept it. Otherwise, when you do it for that person, you'll very easily do it for another person, and then so on and so forth. The next thing you know, you're surrounded by people that you're not really emotionally okay with, and then you'll emotionally withdraw, and you'll internalize that. You won't be happy. You'll be surrounded by unhappiness. Especially lately, there's been deaths and this stuff, and it's going to happen where people are not around, or even you might be in a position where you might die. And in that moment where you might be dying, knowing that death is coming, you're going to think about all these things that you wish you would have done correctly, or these people that you would have apologized to, or these relationships that you would have mended. And I'm done with that. I'm over that. I've been over that for a long time. I live my life as if I might die in 5 minutes. If I die in 5 minutes, what am I going to be thinking about in those 5 minutes? Who are the people that I'm going to want to really reach out to apologize? Well, I don't have that anymore, because I've made sure that things like establishing the boundaries of, look, I get it. I might be a little bit of a downer right now because I want to address the situation, but I want to have whatever relationship you're telling me you want to have. I want that to be legitimate, and I want that to be strong, and I want that to be based off of the true morals that it should be. And by dismissing all of these things and allowing these Trojan horses and these avoidance issues and all these tactics and whatever the crap is going on, you're just inviting more damage. You're just inviting more people to see that same behavior and see you and be like, okay, well, guess what? We can do it too. And then they will. They will. They absolutely will, because they can.
Yeah, that's great advice. And to go back to what you said at the beginning, yeah, the more you engage the narcissist, the worse it gets. And that's what I've learned is I get nasty messages, I get demands, and I can argue, and then you argue for 20 minutes, or you can just, if it's not important and it's not something you think needs to be addressed, for legal reasons, then you just ignore it. And it takes the steam out of them, and then you get some peace for a while. Until they come back at you a couple months later, and then just, sorry, we're not going to have this conversation. Conversation's over, goodbye. But yeah. Well, anyway, Troy, thanks for, telling your story, and hopefully some people can see this and recognize maybe something in their life and get some help they need. But yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Live peaceful, man.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
You too. Bye.
All right, man. Bye.